Canada relies on other countries not only to send our astronauts into space, but to launch our tech too. When Canada needs to send communications or data satellites into orbit, it typically has to pay foreign providers like SpaceX to hitch a ride. A reliance Ottawa is rethinking in light of tense trade relations with the United States.
We want to make sure that we have the capability to control our own destiny and grow the sector, regardless of what other inputs or pressures or challenges we may be.
Canada just made a decision that will reshape North American space power. The Department of National Defense launched a competition called Launch the North, with a total prize value of $105 million. The goal is sovereign space launch capability by 2028. Canada is building rockets that will launch from Canadian soil controlled by Canadian companies for Canadian missions. On the surface, this sounds routine. Canada has contributed to space for decades through satellites, robotics like the Canadarm, and partnerships with NASA. But Canada has never launched anything to orbit from its own territory. The 2025 federal budget committed $182.6 million Canadian dollars over 3 years specifically for the Department of National Defense to establish what it calls a sovereign space launch capability. This was not filed under scientific research or civil space exploration. It was placed in Chapter 4, protecting Canada's sovereignty and security alongside military modernization and defense manufacturing. Ottawa is signaling that access to orbit is now a matter of national sovereignty, not just science. The Launch the North initiative seeks proposals for integrated end-to-end launch solutions capable of delivering payloads to low Earth orbit. The program explicitly requires that solutions must be designed using ITAR, free components and subsystems to maintain export flexibility and strengthen the domestic industrial base. ITAR refers to International Traffic in Arms Regulations, the U.S. export control system that governs defense-related technology. By requiring ITAR-free components, Canada is deliberately cutting American suppliers out of the critical path to space. The initiative focuses on responsive light-lift rockets with the goal of building Canadian capacity and small-scale launch capabilities. Success will lay the foundation for future iterations, including a medium lift challenge, allowing participants to expand and scale solutions over time. The challenge unfolds through a multi-phase process where prizes are awarded at each stage based on evaluation against pre-established criteria. Proposals for Round 1 were accepted until January 9, 2026. Canada's stated objectives are clear. Secure Canada's strategic autonomy in space by reducing reliance on foreign launch providers. Enhance national defense and security through responsive and resilient space access. Stimulate Canadian innovation and dual-use technology development in commercial and defense sectors. Position Canada as a global leader in commercial space, launch, and advanced aerospace technologies. The initiative emphasizes that access to space is as critical as the payloads themselves. Multiple Canadian companies are racing to achieve this goal. Nord Space is developing the Atlantic Spaceport Complex near St. Lawrence, Newfoundland. The facility received environmental approval in early January 2026, clearing a major regulatory hurdle. Nord Space CEO Rahul Goel stated that after hundreds of meetings, dozens of studies, and significant investment over 2 years, this decision positions Nord Space to deliver a sovereign, responsive launch capability for Canada at a moment when it is a true national imperative. Nord Space has developed its own family of rockets, starting with the Taiga suborbital test vehicle and progressing to orbital launchers like the Tundra, capable of delivering up to 500 kilograms to low Earth orbit. The company plans its first orbital launch attempts in coming years following successful suborbital tests. Nord Space operates its own 3D printed HAD field rocket engines using kerosene and liquid oxygen. The company emphasizes a first principles architecture supported by liquid rocket propulsion systems that naturally scale to reusability and medium lift capabilities. Another Canadian company, Reaction Dynamics, has partnered with Maritime Launch Services in Nova Scotia, Canada's first commercial spaceport. Founder and CEO Bashar El-Zain stated that everything is not only built in Canada, everything is made at their factory. The company's goal is to produce more than 90% of rocket components in-house. El-Zain believes strongly that the rocket launch industry is not just about sovereignty, but about creating a space economy. He estimates anywhere between 600 and 1,000 jobs will be created launching Canadian satellites. The strategic implications are profound. For decades, Canada depended on foreign launch providers mostly tied to the U.S. That dependence gave Washington leverage, visibility, and influence over how and when Canadian space assets went into orbit. A domestic launch system gives Canada independent access to orbit, faster deployment of surveillance communications and Earth observation satellites, and far more control over sensitive data. Canada's reliance on space-based systems for communication, navigation, intelligence, surveillance, and early warning continues to grow. The Department of National Defense states that future missions may include hosted payloads for space domain awareness, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, satellite communications, navigation, and space control. Through this challenge, DND aims to build a resilient and future-ready Canadian space ecosystem that ensures Canada's security, prosperity, and leadership in the space domain. The geographic positioning of Canadian spaceports provides strategic advantages. The Atlantic Spaceport Complex in Newfoundland is located at 46 degrees latitude, allowing the range to potentially support a wide variety of launch inclinations. Maritime Launch in Nova Scotia sits on the western edge of the North Atlantic Ocean, clear from launch trajectory obstructions. The range of inclinations available from these sites is described as unparalleled in North America. What the U.S. may be underestimating is how this opens doors for Canada to become a launch hub for other countries seeking alternatives to U.S., Chinese, or Russian rockets. This challenges America's quiet dominance over the North American launch ecosystem, not through confrontation but through redundancy and independence. From Washington's perspective, this is less about rockets and more about losing a monopoly on access, oversight, and influence. The Canadian Space Agency has historically had no indigenous launch system capability beyond upper atmospheric sounding rockets. Canada's first satellite, Alouette 1, launched in 1962 atop an American rocket from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. That made Canada the third country behind the Soviet Union and the U.S. to design and build its own satellite. But every Canadian payload since then has launched on foreign rockets. That 64-year dependence is ending. The part America did not see coming is how this fits into the bigger global space race. As space becomes more militarized and economically critical, even close allies are hedging against over-reliance on any single power. Canada's move signals a broader trend of allies preparing for a future where space access equals national security. The U.S. is not being challenged head-on. It is being bypassed.